so far, everything I've told you about was something that I wouldn't have replaced in my life by anything else. You could give me 10 opportunities to do 10 other things, and I wouldn't have left what I did. But when President Clinton was elected, there was a huge effort to just go out and find people who they wanted to bring in, who they thought would be in sync with what they wanted to do in the Clinton presidency. And at some point, someone from the Department of Health and Human Services, who was collecting the names of people that they wanted to bring in, called me and said, "We'd like you to think about talking to Donna Shalala, who was the Secretary for Health and Human Services. We'd like you to talk to Donna Shalala to think about becoming the General Counsel here." And I said, "Oh, there are so many people who know so much more about government than I do. I've never worked in the federal government. But I could give you some names." And the guy on the telephone said, "We've got names, but we want to know if you would like to even try to do this." So I said, "I want you to make one call to one person and see if she would be willing to do this job." And it was somebody who was a friend of mine, an African-American woman who worked at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and I thought, wouldn't it be fabulous if she took this job? Well, it turned out that she had just become engaged to some guy who lived somewhere in the deep South, and she didn't feel like, they called her. And she said she was very happy to be called, but she was not prepared to leave her husband of 5 minutes and go back to Washington to work. So they called me back and said, "Okay, now what do you want us to do?" And I said, "Well, I'll come and see you." And I did. And working for Donna Shalala and making friends with the people who were part of that organization and being in the White House and in the position that I was in was something that a kid from Houston, Texas would never have thought could happen, but it did. It was incredibly, I mean, I used to go home the first few weeks after I was working there thinking, I am the luckiest person ever. And what did I do to deserve this? But it was wonderful. It was truly wonderful. And it was terrific to work for that administration because there was organization, there was real intercommunication. So if the White House was put out with something that the Health and Human Services Secretary wanted to do, they would call a group of us in and we would go in and sit down and we would explain why we wanted not to do what they asked us to do. And they would explain why. It's very important to the president. Do you understand that? And Donna would say, yes, I do understand it, but I don't think y'all are right about what you want to have happen. And we wouldn't do it. It was such a lesson, especially given the circumstances we're living with now. It was such a lesson in real communication with the president and real interconnection with all the general counsels at all the other departments, at the Justice Department, and at all of the departments. We all knew each other, and it was a very supportive group. But you went to work every day having no clue whatever might happen. And that made it extraordinary, just extraordinary and fun. And all the people who were long-serving members of the Department of Health and Human Services were wonderful people to work with, and they were so pleased to have a Democrat again. It was funny because the Department of Agriculture was not as welcoming to the Democrats who were coming in to work as were the people, for example, at Health and Human Services. So there are, within those entities, things going on that make a difference. But who would have known? I certainly wouldn't have known.